Hello, I'm Bill Peschel, and this is Mechanicsburg Mystery Presents a conversation with Victoria Dowd. Victoria is the author of the Smart Woman series, of which there are 4 books: The Smart Woman's Guide to Murder, Body on the Island, The Supper Club Murders, and her latest, A Book of Murder. Her debut novel, The Smart Woman's Guide to Murder, won the People's Book Prize for Fiction in 2021. It's an award voted on by the readers. Her short story was also shortlisted for the CWA Dagger. Victoria is from Sheffield in Yorkshire, the home of Michael Palin, studied law at Cambridge University, and like Rumpole of the Bailey, was a defense barrister. She is a lifelong fan of Agatha Christie and recently appeared at the International Agatha Christie Festival in Torquay. She lives in London with her family. Victoria, welcome to the podcast.
Hello. Thank you very much for having me on.
Yes, absolutely. I had to show my British bona fides by mentioning Michael Palin and Rumpole. But you are and you were a barrister defending people at the Old Bailey, right?
That's correct. Yes, for many years. I was appearing for the defense, as it were.
Yes, but you also did some prosecutions as well, which Rumpole never would do. How did you become a barrister? Why did you go in that direction?
I did originally, when I was a little girl, read The Witness for the Prosecution, and I very much liked that. And I loved that there was this lawyer in there, and I obviously watched the movie and everything. And then I got into there was a program on TV about Sir Edward Marshall Hall in The Shadow of the Noose, and I really wanted to, be a crusading justice warrior.
You saw yourself as the hero, working for justice.
Yeah, it didn't quite work out like that all of the time.
Yes, that's reality. I've read a lot of books and a lot of TV, and I look back and I think, I kind of wished reality was like a TV show.
Yeah,
all the problems solved in 30 minutes, and everybody's happy. So, how did you transition then from being a defense barrister to writing mystery novels?
Well, I'd always been writing from a very young age, but you can't really go to your careers tutor at school and say, I want to be a crime writer. You can go and say, I want to be a lawyer. That's a little easier. So I continued writing a little bit, and then I started to get a few things published. And then I won the Gothic Fiction Prize for my short fiction, and thought, I need to give it a go with the novel writing.
Yeah.
And I took a year's sabbatical from my chambers, and I'm still on that now. And that's like 22 years ago.
Mm-hmm. Are you still involved in the law in some way?
Not really. No, I don't practice. I still see people from my chambers occasionally, and we meet up and chat, and they want to know all about crime writing. That's exciting to them.
Oh, are there any there who said, I thought of doing this as well?
Oh yeah, everybody at chambers has always wanted to write a book.
You have to they have certain expectations. You have to say, look, when you're really doing this, you're spending 8 hours a day seated in a chair with a back brace. I understand you have a back brace as well when you write.
I do. I often have to look after my back. I think, like most of us, I have to do the Pilates. I have to wear all manner of things to pull my shoulders back. It's not the most natural of seated positions.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, one thing that interested me about your series here is it looked like you had 4 books published relatively quickly. It's like all of a sudden, boom, here you are, 4 full novels in only a couple of years. Is this correct? Yeah. Or is it, how did this get started? How did the Smart Women series come about?
Well, we were on holiday, and I'd sort of played around with a few ideas. And my husband said to me, why don't you write something in like the things you like to read, sort of golden age detective novels? And this was kind of, in sort of 2018, 2019. And they weren't that popular at that time, and I'd been writing a few short stories like that. And, it used to be about 15 years ago, if you said you liked golden age detection and and Agatha Christie. But oh, really? That's not terribly fashionable, is it? And I mean, now obviously there's been this huge resurgence in the genre, and people love it. So I just thought I'd give it a go, and that was The Smart Woman's Guide to Murder. What I really wanted to do was write it in a more up-to-date setting and have characters people could really relate to, who weren't actual sleuths, who were just this family who were pretty dysfunctional, and introduce a little bit of comedy into that as well to update it.
It's a very dark comedy as well, because if you like, I'll go over some of the characters here, because it really centers around 5 women, 3 of whom are related. There's Pandora Smart, excuse me, who is the mother of Ursula Smart, who narrates the stories. And Ursula is in her mid-20s. She's, like I said, Pandora's daughter. They have a interesting, contentious relationship. And I have a wife and daughter as well. And so sometimes when they're bickering, I say, oh, I've been here, haven't I? I've usually just go into the next room until the dust settles. So there's Pandora and Ursula, and then there's Aunt Charlotte, who is a relative of them, and 2 friends that start out as their book club, Mirabelle and Bridget. And Bridget, who has various animals of various kinds. And they show up, of course, in the first book, The Smart Woman's Guide to Murder, as a book club. So you have a family and a book club, and the thing that dominates the stories is Ursula's father, who died when she was young, and who also appears as a ghost. And again, I can kind of empathize a little bit with that, because my father died when I was 15 and basically collapsed on the floor, and that was it. So that longing for a father figure and her relationship with her father post-mortem is one of the threads that runs through the story. And it's a very dark area.
Yeah, I really wanted to, part of the thing I really wanted to do with the books was deal more with death, which sounds obvious because they are murder mysteries, so there's going to be a lot of death. But I didn't want them to be that kind of situation where, they're in a cocktail party and everybody's just stepping over the body. And I really wanted to put death at the center of the books. And how would a fairly fragile woman deal with seeing a death? How would we all deal with that if we were in, a mansion, cut off from the world, and suddenly somebody's dead in front of you? I don't think it would be quite as clinical as some of the books deal with it. And I really wanted to have her as somebody, who was quite an unreliable narrator. So you're never quite sure if you're getting the truth. And also someone who people could say, yeah, actually, a lot of us have experienced grief in our lives and death. And what would it be like if we were faced with a pretty brutal situation in front of us and we couldn't get away from it? How would we deal with that? Not very well is usually the answer to that question, I think.
Yes, and somehow you manage to mine the darkness for comedy as well at the same time, because Pandora Smart, her mother, is not one who doesn't grieve in the same way as Ursula does. There's a running thread of Bob the therapist, who shows up. I don't want to reveal too much, but just to lay down the line that he's there, but in the background. But Pandora is the kind in which Ursula says frequently, mother doesn't do X,
That's
mother.
Right.
And that's a motif that repeats itself through, because Pandora is very repressive. And if I got that right?
Yes, she is very. And what I really wanted to do with their relationship was, in the first book, people were quite shocked how abrasive they are with each other and very honest. But I think in our sort of unguarded moments, when we're just with very close family members, that is when we can be at our most honest. And things are said that you wouldn't necessarily say to somebody who wasn't that close to you. And the arc of the books goes through their relationship and how incredibly close they are, and how death has brought them so close together. And there's this very much a veneer of they riff off each other all the time. There's bickering, but actually, they would stand by one another in the face of death and in the face of a killer, and protect one another to the end.
Mm-hmm.
So, and also I really wanted to bring in the comedy of that sort of situation. Coming from Yorkshire, I have some very strong-willed women in my family. Not that the people in the book are particularly based on anybody in particular, but there is that kind of, grit and determination about them that, they won't just take no for an answer. And often that does go over into quite comedic situations in very dark places. There's a kind of, I love that sort of funereal humor where, the urge to laugh at a funeral when you just think, no, I shouldn't do this. No, something funny's happened. I definitely should. I mean, we used to have that all the time in court. Something would happen. It'd be a terrible case with awful things. And then something would happen and you think, oh my God, I cannot laugh at this moment.
Oh my gosh. That would be very shocking. And the fact that you're in your wig and gown and you're in a solemn occasion, it even makes it more tempting to bust out laughing, but you can't, and that kind of reinforces it. And that's something I considered when reading the books, is the relationship between Pandora and Ursula. And two things. One is that Ursula, for example, is not cowering. Pandora says the most awful things to her, but Ursula snaps back as well, and you never get the feeling that she's crumpling. Like I think some of the other characters, like Mirabelle or Bridget, when Pandora rags against them, and you can see them kind of crumpling, Ursula stands up to that. She has her weaknesses, but she has her strengths as well. Mm-hmm. And then there are going to be certain incidents, again, I won't reveal spoilers, that you can see Pandora does care about Ursula greatly, but it has to be in extremis for that to happen.
Yes, and it has to be, on their own terms, basically. Mm-hmm. And each of them has their own roadmap for where they think the relationship should go. And obviously they're enormously formed by this sudden death that's happened in their family. Mm-hmm. Whether he's a ghost or not, who knows? Is he actually there, or something that she just sees? And she often questions herself about that, because of course, no one would openly say, I see the ghost of my ex. That's but Bob the therapist doesn't really appear physically either.
Yeah, it's usually in the form of what advice he's given or where he is at a certain time. And again, no spoilers at all. Actually, it just reminds me, speaking of Michael Palin, he cropped up in the news because his wife died a few years ago, and he apparently, like a few months later, said he heard her voice, and her voice was telling him, you need to get up and get moving again, live your life. And I
think there are different levels of what do we think of as when we say ghost. It isn't, the kind of floating around spirit a lot of the time. It can be in many different ways. The manifestation of loss and grief. I really wanted to deal with that in the books. And when someone passes, I don't think we don't lose that bond. We don't lose that relationship. We're still having a relationship with that person inside of us, but they're just not there anymore. I really wanted to explore that and keep going down that route with the books.
Yeah. And in fact, there's a revelation about her father as well that informs the later books. And again, no spoilers, but it's not a stable, I guess what I'm trying to say is it's not a stable situation from book to book. It doesn't need to be read in order, but I think you have a better experience because, of course, there are changes in book 4 that happen in book 3 that are rather substantial, and they have their things as well. And one of the things I especially enjoyed, especially by book 4, is that Pandora becomes a blogger. And she's trading in on the horrible things that have happened in the first couple of books.
She loves it. And the blog takes off. It's, It's because she's basically writing about their own personal experiences of murderers and true crime. So the blog takes off and it becomes a podcast, and there's more to come with that involving television. So it becomes this huge career for her, but she's obviously revealing things to the general public that are slightly more private in nature. So book 5 is coming out this November, and it's going to have implications for that book.
Oh, you mean next month? Next
yes.
month? Oh,
yes.
good.
Yes.
Excellent.
And it's a Christmas one. Oh, it comes out in November and it's for Christmas, but that's what I'm told happens in publishing. And then there's a wedding. They have to have a wedding in one of them. I shan't say whose.
Okay. I have no idea. That would be fascinating. I mean, I guess I could guess, but I don't want to.
This one's set in Finland, and it's all very icy and snowy, and Father Christmas even turns up.
Well, what was especially enjoyable, if in certain phrases, a book of murder opens up with a blog post from Pandora about the death of a celebrity and how terrible it is, and how it, if all this, and all I could think of is wow, if you listen to yourself, you'd really think you're a horrible person for saying things this way. Yeah. Oh, and also that she refers to her family as assistants.
Oh, I like that you got that bit, yeah, because originally people were saying, but they're not her assistants. For Pandora, they are.
Yeah. Now, the Book of Murder takes place on a very unusual location. Do you want to tell us where?
Yes, it's on a fort that's in the Solent. So Solent is, you probably already know, and your listeners probably already know, just in case anybody doesn't, it's the body of water between England and France, where the Isle of Wight is, a little island. But there are forts there that were built for fortification of the UK, but most of them are empty. One of them is a hotel, I believe, now. I think they're for sale for a few £1 million at the moment. But I used it as a big circular structure, and I used it as the home of a famous crime writer called Anthony Lovell. And it opens at the trial for his murder.
And this is the first one. This is kind of a surprise in a way, because being a barrister, you would think, oh, you'd be writing legal thrillers like John Grisham. And instead, you waited for your 4th book to actually set a story in court or set it within the law.
Yes. Well, I did think, I had to at some point. And then I was having doubts about a few things, thinking, oh, no, hang on. Do they still hand bundles of photographs to the jury, or would there be slightly more tech involved? Well, the Old Bailey's not particularly a very tech place, but it is a little bit more updated than that. So I had to have a few drinks with barrister colleagues and make sure I got all the facts correct.
Because you mentioned, and I saw this on another podcast, you still have your barrister wig, don't you?
I do, yes.
you have do you come with a robe as well?
Yes, and the whole collar and everything, yeah.
Yeah. So because you're writing kind of in the spirit of Agatha Christie, because you've got clues and all that, and alibis, and you're setting up the story, and of course dealing with characters and locations, is it difficult to plan for this? Is it something that takes a lot of effort to do?
It does, actually. Yeah, I have what I call my murder boards, which are they've got the pieces of string, the post-it notes, all the pictures and maps and all that sort of thing. That I would show them to you, but it might give away the plot. Actually.
Oh, we don't need to know that, but we know you have a board. You showed this on someone else's episode, and it's got pictures and notes, and it's almost a conspiracy theory.
It is. It's very. I'm just having a look if I can move the camera a little bit. Like a quick flash there. There's a few. There we go. I don't think you can see too many plot points there. And so they build and build over the course of writing the books. And for my 3rd book, The Supper Club Murders, basically that is a safari supper club where they go from house to house, having a course in each house for the supper. And I thought this was wonderful. I went on one in Devon, and it was really, really dark, and people kept dipping in and out. So at any particular moment, you didn't entirely know where everybody was, which is brilliant for a murder mystery because I can hide people in plain sight, and you forget who's where. But as I was writing the book, I forgot who was where and thought, oh no, who peeled off at this moment, and who was there then, and who would have heard this? So my son built me the entire village out of Lego, and each character had a little tiny minifigure, so that I did have the Smart women in Lego, their own little set. And it was fabulous because every time they moved in the book, I would move them on the table, these little figures. So I knew exactly where everybody was all at the same time.
I think it's a great idea.
My son would occasionally have dire need of one of the characters to play with. And I'd wake up in the morning, come to the board and go, why is Chewbacca here instead of this figure?
Well, you have to figure out the answers in your own way. This is what writers have to do because you're writing kind of in the dark, and you have to use whatever's at hand in order to solve the problem, whether it's post-it notes on the wall in order or a Lego set. And I find that wonderful. And that was a very, I think it's also one of the things that characterize your books is basically the foulness of most of everybody you meet there.
Yeah.
The Supper Club is a great example because there was a moment where they're in the castle. You know, they're the lady of the manor who married up. She was a former book club member. So that's why they were invited as part of the supper safari. And she says, at the end of your stay, we don't have enough help. So please use the washer to wash your bedding and fold it up nicely and put it all back. And I'm thinking, wow, that's...
Yeah. I have stayed places like that.
I admit, I've lived a very sheltered life. I worked on a newspaper copy desk, and I don't go out and meet people. And I just thought, wow, are all English people really this rude and nasty?
They can be. Beneath all that politeness, there's definitely a cold heart of rudeness occasionally, and they don't mind a little bit of abrasion. I do get that a little bit. People say, oh, everybody's so frightful in these books. But of course, you have to believe that each of these people is capable of taking a human life. They're capable of doing, for the books to work, to be more than one suspect, you have to suspect this person would, in some horrific manner, poison, stab, or in whatever manner, kill another human being. And, you look at a book sort of like, and then there were none. They're purposefully gathered together because every single one of them is a terrible, evil, wicked person, but in varying degrees of that. Nice people don't generally get involved in murders. Absolutely.
And if you want to have unpleasant characters, if you want to have nasty characters, don't make them boring. And these are not boring. I especially adored the magician, the failed magician who's in there. Again, I won't say more about it, but watching him try to pull a trick and basically being slovenly about it. It was the Supper Club Murders is I enjoy. I think that's probably my favorite of the bunch. Just because
I went for coffee with my editor, and she said the same thing. She said, "Oh, the Supper Club Murders is definitely my favourite one." And I think everybody wants to, get marooned in a castle on Dartmoor, and there'd be possibly not murders, but a malevolent little monkey. I do have a monkey in that one.
Yep, absolutely, in a castle with murder holes and not trellises, whatever those things are, the fences that go up and down.
Yeah, the portcullis gate. Yes, they're very important. I did a lot of research for that one, actually, because obviously it's a locked room mystery. I have to, almost build the structure and make sure it all works completely. And a lot of it is a bit like a magic trick, particularly with, a locked room mystery. So I thought, why not have a magician in this who points the way towards certain things? Because it is essentially a conjuring trick that I'm trying to pull off. But, how did this happen? It seems like an impossible crime. Of course, it's possible, because it's happened, but exactly how.
Yeah, and that is the hardest trick, and probably one reason why a lot of people don't try to write Christie-like endings is because the plotting to make that happen and use the right tricks to kind of slide it by, like Murder of Roger Ackroyd.
Yeah.
There's a book written about by a French philosopher who killed Roger Ackroyd, in which you get a really good insight into how Christie managed to do it, how to make it obvious without making it obvious. And it could be as simple as a phrase in the middle of a sentence, because we tend to remember the beginning of sentences or the end of sentences, but not in the middle. So you say the usher who worked on the ship, and it goes right past you, and you don't realize that's a major clue until it's already too late.
And it's how to hide them as well. I mean, I love putting the humor in there, and also the supernatural, but like Agatha Christie used to do, they are often a tool to hide everything else. So you're looking at the fact that there's this hilarious incident happening, but I will have slipped a clue in amongst it all in there somewhere. Or the fact that you're frightened, and hopefully there's moments when, it is quite scary being in this environment. You think something's coming. I want you to almost think that there could be a ghost that has committed these crimes. So, for instance, in the Sittard mystery, was the seance real? Did it actually happen that it was predictable? Of course it wasn't. We know it wasn't. Agatha knows it wasn't. But we still suspend our disbelief and think, it could be, couldn't it? And then obviously the little clue is slipped in underneath that.
Yeah. And it's to Agatha's credit, she always used the supernatural in her mysteries as distractions. She wrote short stories elsewhere that you could consider supernatural, but I think it's the Egyptian tomb short story, Poirot says, yes, superstitions exist, but they exist in a way because people believe in them, not that there's actually anything behind that.
And they're very powerful as well. They're incredible. People's belief and what they imagine could have happened is incredibly powerful, as Poirot says in that story. And if you're taken down that avenue and you believe, then anything could happen. Yeah.
Is it particularly difficult to write a contemporary Christie, a Christie in these times where you have access to cell phones and instant communications, and you could have police in a helicopter coming in? Yeah, very much so. The number of times these women who are not police officers have no real reason to encounter murder situations so regularly, do find themselves isolated is extraordinary, really. Snowstorms, rainstorms, out in the middle of nowhere.
I have to think of a reason why they would be. So for the second book, I decided they thought they weren't very good at surviving a difficult situation. So embark on a kind of Bear Grylls style survival course to the Outer Hebrides, which I thought actually they probably would do something like that. But with the blog taking off, it has given me more of a reason for them to be in these situations around murderers or crime writers and be in more jeopardy. But yes, it is very difficult to remove mobile phones, Wi-Fi, telephones. That's one of the first things I have to think about. So that's why with the fourth book, I went for something completely different and started the book at the criminal trial. So it's covered in lawyers, police officers, everything. And you've even got, somebody's standing trial for the murder. So they're not isolated in that one, but we have to go back in time to see what happened. Yes, and I was kind of interested in a book of murder with the author, with the main author. I'm sorry, what is his name again? Anthony Lovell. Thank you. But also his Sheridan LaFoy character, because he reminds me of the Preston Child books, Aloysius Pendergrast. Right. But also, was the name a variation on Sheridan Le Fanu? It was, yes, very much so, yes. I'm often playing around with people's names quite a lot as well in the books. There does seem to be Easter eggs in your book. Yeah, there's quite a lot of them, actually. I had a lot of fun writing that book because they're all crime writers gathered together for a convention. of course, each one of them has to have written a book or a series of books. So I had to write lots and lots of little books to fit inside the main book. So Anthony Lovell is a hugely famous crime writer in the book. Of course, he has to have a main character. And I absolutely loved writing Sheridan LaFoy. And I had all the different books that he'd written. And you know, obviously he's got all the artifacts from these books in his strange little fort that he lives in. So that was a huge amount of fun. And also, you know, the characters of the writers and the kind of writers that you get at, you know, crime writing festivals.
Yes. Have you met you must have met a number of them now that you're among them as well. Has any of them informed your writing?
A little bit.
And again, there's the comedy as well, because there was a scene earlier on where the smart women were looking at this box of manuscripts, this display of them. And of course, one of them takes out the manuscript and starts flipping through it. And, you know, everybody's just going, "What are you doing? This is his first book. It's like a religious relic." "Oh, no, I'm just flipping through it." And then, well, things happen. But again,
I love that bit. That's my sister's favourite bit, actually. She loves Aunt Charlotte. And the fact that she's just, you know, it's clearly shouldn't be taking things out of the glass cases.
And yes, I know, I actually know somebody. You could go into a museum with them and you have to watch them because it's a museum of somebody's home. Imagine them going to like Agatha Christie's house and just, "Oh, let me just pull this book off and look at it."
There's always one. There's always one. If you do go to Greenway down in Devon, there's always somebody attempting to, you know, sit at her typewriter. Or something that you think, "Oh my goodness, that's irreplaceable."
I'm afraid that reminds me. I see the guitar in the background. It just reminds me of famous guitars that are like in a museum. And all I can think of is, you know, they really need to be played. Nobody cares about that guitar being Jimi Hendrix's guitar. It's more important that be used.
Yeah.
And I can understand why, you know, nobody buys Agatha Christie's home, because there is something very special about it. There's a lot of history behind it. And it's very nice to be able to imagine her being there, working hard. And that's the other thing about her as well, is just, I remember when I was counting up early on, when I was doing research for our annotations, just how much writing she did. And even in the early years, she was putting out a novel and a dozen short stories a year. And then during the war years, she was just a writing machine.
Yeah. And I think to start with as well, you kind of forget that in 26, she became a single mother, you know, and she was writing not to survive so much, but, you know, because she had to take care of herself, you know, and she often did. She would go all over the world by herself, which even now people would say, "I can't believe you're going off to, you know, Egypt by yourself."
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's right. She went to Nineveh or Nim the first time because she was going to go west to the West Indies, and somebody suggested, "Oh, you need to go east. You need to go to," and she rode on the Orient Express and rode far by herself and opened up a whole new life. She was a very adventurous woman, far more so than you think.
Independent as well, very independent, you know, and to do that, you know, especially then, but nowadays as well, you have to get a lot of books out there. And with crime, especially with somebody like she had Poirot and then later Marple, readers love them. And the expectation is once they finish that book, they want to move to the next book immediately. You know, they don't want you to have, you know, time off for trotting around the globe.
Yes. And of course, Poirot being the first one that she created, she never expected that she was going to spend the next 60 years writing Poirot novels. And of course, came
that's
to
the problem with the age of him. He's already retired when we meet him. I think someone worked out that he must have been about 120 years old at the
end. Yes. Now, this leads up to I'm curious personally, you were at the Agatha Christie, the International Festival last month in Torquay. What was that like?
Oh, it's fantastic. It's one of those wonderful festivals where everybody's so lovely and it's a really joyful experience. It's really big as well. There's a lot goes on around it as well, you know, plays, readings, all kinds of things. I was on an event where we were discussing the best short story, and it was run as a balloon debate where basically, you probably already know this, but you have to choose between two stories, and one gets ousted out of the balloon if it doesn't win. But the winner was, the witness for the prosecution.
Oh, okay. Yes, very much so. We've seen everything. My wife Teresa published a book, Agatha Christie She Watched, which is a collection of all the movie reviews of all the movies we've seen, and we're now into the international Agatha Christie. But the witness for the prosecution, we've seen all three versions of it, and we actually like the Sarah Phelps version.
I do. I like that one very much. It captures that darkness, I think, that's in the book. And Romaine is so clever and has to survive. And she uses her cleverness to survive the situation where she knows, and Agatha uses our assumptions when we go into a book that particularly, the refugee lady is not going to be terribly clever, but she'll just be quite emotional. She won't understand what's going on so much, but she knows all the way through that she's used that against us. And the fact that we would assume that anybody giving evidence in a court is trying to make you think that they're telling the truth.
That's true. You've had personal experience on that as well. You've seen people testify, and maybe there's a part, even the defendant, and there may be a part of you saying, that's a complete load of bollocks.
Yeah. Yes, definitely.
Well, I also bring this up in part because you actually have a series of articles on your website adapting Agatha.
That's right. Yes.
Yeah. Why did you start doing that?
Well, it was when the first book came out, and I was saying to my husband, I've got a website. I don't really know what to put on it. I can't just say to people, buy my book. That's just boring to keep saying that all the time to people. And he said, why don't you write about something that you love and that, feeds into that sort of thing? And, I love watching the old Poirots and the old Marples. I love all the Agatha Christie movies. And I just thought it might be fun to write a couple of articles where they compare one another. And I compare, the new ones with the older ones. But obviously, I didn't realize at the time. I knew there was quite a lot of writing went on about it, but I didn't realize, social media, I had to get involved in it and discover, Facebook groups where the tiny minutiae of each film is analysed. And, there are people like yourself and your wife where, it's a lifetime's commitment to this.
It was 2.5 years in our part. And that was watching about 2 movies a week, 2 movies, 2 TV episodes, and writing about them. And it started much the same way because Teresa wrote a review of Crooked House, the movie, for the website, just so we'd have something on there. And, she did that. And she had found there was another episode, I think it was Secret of Chimneys, because I was doing an annotated version of it. And she found it was a Marple episode. Of all things. I know. It's very confusing. And my family who've watched these with me, when I say things like, it's not a Marple book, and they're like, what do you mean? Which is extraordinary because you've got the 13 problems, and a lot of those have never been adapted, and they're brilliant stories. Yeah. And why they haven't used those and they went to standalones is I don't know. Yeah, because they can do the short stories because they did a version of the Blue Geranium story.
That was a good version as well. Yeah.
It was an excellent version. We saw it again recently and it was just like, wow, that still holds up. It's very nice. Yeah.
And the lady's so, hypochondria is just her middle name, and that's really good. But there's so many excellent stories, and you could have that wonderful overarching story of all of those people in the village who sit together and say, we're going to talk about mysteries and unsolved mysteries. So, the Idle House of Astarte, Death by Drowning, all these amazing stories with great twists. I mean, you look at something like The Bloodstained Pavement, why that's never been adapted, and yet they put Miss Marple into other stories.
Endless Night. Endless Night. And it's like two different movies. You know, you have the original movie, the original story there, and then Miss Marple pops up, and she seems to spend all her time hanging around outside of St. Mary Mead. And you wonder, why are you doing?
Yeah,
but
it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And that one especially. It's a difficult one to adapt, though, I should imagine, Endless Night.
Yeah. Have you seen Kenneth Branagh's latest, A Haunting in Venice?
Yes, I have, yeah. It's okay. And I mean, I had already read a little online, and from the previous movies knew not to expect it to be a straight adaptation of Halloween Party. And I don't think that's what he's going for. It's good. It's okay. I think I'd have to watch it again. I like the atmosphere.
Yeah.
I love that kind of, bringing in the concept of the supernatural. It's very good. I think it was a little bit more, for me, almost Daphne du Maurier style, that kind of Don't Look Now, where you don't quite know what's going on, and it's quite a ghostly presence in Venice and the mists and the, So, yeah, that was slightly unusual, I thought. But, the other adaptations have been quite unusual as well. I wasn't a fan of Death on the Nile, even though it's one of my favourite books. And there are some marvellous I love the original one, the original movie. And I also like the Suchet one as well. That's really good.
Yeah.
But that one, I think probably they suffered a little because of the casting, and maybe because of the time when they were trying to shoot it during COVID. I think there were all sorts of problems for it. But Murder on the Orient Express, that's an okay version of it, I think. It's not my favourite.
Yeah, I'm afraid so. I did like A Haunting in Venice. We went in with low expectations, and I think part of it maybe because of it had to be shot inside, and there's a lot of darkness and all that kind of restrains. We call him Sir Kenny at home because he's like a child with his toys. I'm sorry. There's a quote Orson Welles, a movie studio is the best toy a child could have. Yeah. And with Orient Express, you see him moving the camera around and moving it around the train, and he's walking across the train tracks and doing all these exciting things. And with Haunting in Venice, he's restricted. He has to be indoors. There's not as much that he could do, so the story can still breathe. There's time for it to do.
Some of the stuff in Orient Express, though, visually, I thought was magnificent. Not maybe where the train gets smothered, where it's still a little bit too action for me.
Yeah.
But the bit where the train is pulling out, and each window is kind of a picture frame and frames each suspect.
Yeah.
I thought that was quite beautifully done. And the bit where it's the denouement and they're all sitting at the long table, and it's got that kind of Last Supper feel to it.
Yeah.
And it's very beautifully shot.
Yeah.
I particularly liked the casting of the chap who was a ballet dancer. And he's in a fight at the beginning, just before he gets on board the train.
That's right, the Count.
And the way he spins around in this fight is almost like a dance. I thought that was very beautiful how they did that. And Johnny Depp, I thought was a really good Ratchet, really good.
Yeah.
Properly kind of messed up guy who can't look at himself in the mirror.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that, they bear more watching. But I've always said, I don't really think Sir Kenny's audience is me. They've already got me. I'm already there. They're trying to pull in a new audience for the 21st century, and I will already go and watch them. So
yeah, and I'm fine with that because it keeps Agatha alive.
Yeah,
and I know at least one person who actually wanted to know more about Agatha, and this was after he saw the 2001 version of Orient Express with Alfred Molina. It was a TV version. Yeah,
I remember that one. Yeah, it's not great, is it? It's not great.
It had good moments as well. But
Yeah.
let's get back to your writing. You have your book coming out in November. What was it called?
It's called Murder Most Cold.
Okay.
So it's kind of a riff on the old Margaret Rutherford's the Murder Most Foul.
Murder Most Foul, right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that one is set in Finland,
Mm-hmm.
in the Arctic Circle. And it's a locked lake mystery.
Oh, good.
There's a body under the ice that couldn't possibly have got under the ice.
Oh, that sounds good. I'm looking forward to that very much. And how can people reach you if they want to know more about your books?
Mostly through my website is best. There's a contact page there, so it's just victoriadowd.com. But I'm around on social media, as all authors are these days. So I'm on Twitter, or X, as it's now known, and Facebook and places like that. So, yeah, I'm around and about.
Absolutely. And of course, the Mechanicsburg Mystery Bookshop in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania has copies of Victoria's books. So please come check them out. And Victoria, I want to thank you very much for talking with us today. I have ran over far more than I expected, and I've got to shut down so I can get to the dentist on time and have a crown put in. So this is Bill Peschel saying goodbye on behalf of the Mechanicsburg Mystery Bookshop, and I hope that your favorite book is the one you're reading right now. Bye-bye.
Bye.
The Mechanicsburg Mystery Presents podcast is sponsored by the Mechanicsburg Mystery Bookshop in Mechanicsburg, Pennsylvania. The store is open with limited hours, plus we accept appointments and offer a drive-by service. The store will also ship books to your home, including those from the Peschel Press Mystery line, including our annotated editions of novels by Agatha Christie and Dorothy L. Sayers. To learn more, visit the store at www.mysterybooksonline.com. And thank you for listening.